to sweat over that one.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's also very welcome because too often, and to some degree, it still falls into a dichotomy, and yet you're talking about the complexities of possibly even seeing something as us and them. You're saying that it's us and them, however, it's with these other dimensions. And it's a really important way of looking at that rather than simply saying, well, it's us versus them, period. You know, so it complexes, I mean, complicates, thank you. I knew it started with a C. Okay. A way of looking at something that is not always seen in a more complex fashion.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Great. No, I'm curious because Martha, my thoughts were not quite the same, but similar. But were there, besides those two that were clearly of a different genre, did you have trouble with any of these sentences of where they actually belong? And what kinds of struggles did you have, or were there any? Were they all clear-cut, or were there times when you and Susan had to really
there were, and
cancel these out?
I should have mentioned not all of the utterances were actually coded, because some of them just didn't really fall into a function.
Can you give an example?
I'm trying to think of one without opening up my huge Excel spreadsheet. I'm trying to think. There was something like 728 of them. I think we coded for 73% of them.
Okay.
And then there were some that just didn't, like, trying to think of an example.
So when you write about this, do you write about the ones you didn't code and why you didn't code them at all? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because
I'd just be curious about.
When we were looking at, we were really looking at the functionality, and if it didn't actually function to structure a group identity within this framework, we kind of put it by the wayside if we didn't see it as doing that. And we went over the data 3 or 4 times, each of us, discussing why we were excluding certain things and how things functioned.
So then of these reviews, then like 75% or so actually took an us-them perspective, but there was 25% that was other stuff. Is that what you're saying?
I would say that not the reviews themselves, the content of the reviews. Like, there were certain utterances that were used for
the utterances.
The speech acts. So if, for instance, a speech act operated not as an identifying speech act, not as a functional speech act in reference to a group, but more of a transition statement for their own argument, that's one that didn't really function in terms of, I think it's a bad example too. I'm going to have to think about that. Can I come back to that?
Yeah, you can, or later. I mean, even I'm just curious to see what they look like.
Yeah, because we had them and we struggled with them. I mean, when you're dealing with this kind of data where you don't have pitch and tone and prosody and relationship, physical relationship to one another, it was quite a struggle to get through it in terms of actually making and nearest.
But interesting using such commonplace text, Amazon reviews. I mean, I really think that's really
And you don't have to worry about IRB.
Oh, but I did. Oh, but I did, and it was delightful. They were great. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about within a particular review, how those comments played out. I'm guessing it was sort of, if you think of them as mini interactions with the review and then comments upon the comments, and so all of those layers. Is there a way I know you did computer-mediated discursive analysis, is there a way in which you can sort of track the progression of those things? Or
We looked at them. I looked at them personally visually, because
okay.
there were spaces within. On Amazon.com, there's not necessarily threads. It's a very timeline-based kind of CMC structure. So what I was able to do was over time visually map out which comments are posted and which reviews are posted and which comments are posted to those. So you get this huge tree kind of deal, and to kind of get at the interplay that. Which reviews are still getting comments 3 years after they're posted, and that's where that claimed or flamed idea came from. This idea that those cultureless, thank you for that, yes, those cultureless reviews were kind of cruxes for other people to take off on as they tried to, claim it as their own or not. Did that get at what you were?
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, and I think that those two, point out how they became sort of a vacuum that, almost that invites contestation. And so, and that's really, there is this really kind of war, back and forth that's going on all through this. I think that would be, it'd just be interesting to take a couple representatives of reviews and see how that plays out within, our cycle.
Yeah, I have slides on that, but ran out of time. Yeah. Well, not in this presentation. Yes?
Maybe you got at this in a different way, but since you're talking about speech acts, did you try to code or discuss the illocutionary effect of an utterance that might have seemed neutral on the face of it, but actually had a push in either way?
Not explicitly. We had paid some attention to that, especially when we were thinking about those two that we couldn't quite place, thinking about what was the illocutionary force behind them. And after having read through them several times, Susan and I just couldn't see our way clear there.
You couldn't speculate.
We couldn't speculate without, hey, remember that comment you left on Amazon? Could you, talking about why you wrote these things, and that was not in my IRB. So it would almost be, we'd almost have to go back and talk to them in order to really get a sense of whether that illocutionary force was there. In other comments, it was definitely there. But it wasn't something I explicitly coded for. No? Okay. I'm getting a hand and I'm getting a stop.
One more quick thing.
Mixed
You
messages.
mentioned somebody studied the Amazon reviews, and did that person study kind of discourse patterns of those reviews, or what was being studied?
What they were doing was they were looking at the discourse patterns of the Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and BarnesandNoble.com, and they were comparing them with word-of-mouth book focus groups to kind of establish a correlation between this type of talk and this type of talk. So it was marketing research. They were looking at how reliable is this kind of talk, and how does it map onto in-person, real-time talk about books.
And did they identify types of discourse, or just looking for the match?
They were just looking for the match. So their goal was to establish a correlative, so that people who are working at online bookstores can put stock into what people are saying on their websites.
Thank you.